Hi, my name is Sarah Payne and I'm going to talk to you about rotary cutters. Now, rotary cutters are one of the most sort of well-used tools that you will have in your kit because it enables us to cut multiple layers of fabric at the same time, accurately and quickly. And you will be using a cutting mat like this one to protect your table, an acrylic template or ruler like this one. Take your rotary cutter along the edge of your ruler, always cutting away from yourself, and you will actually be able to cut shapes, templates, strips, all sorts of things. But eventually these blades will need replacing. Now with this particular one, the other day I ran over a pin. I didn't realise the pin was under my fabric, and I've actually cut a nick out of my rotary cutter, just the blade here, which means now that when I'm cutting, every 4 inches or so, 3 to 4 inches, it misses a bit because the blade is no longer sharp and true. I need to change this blade because it's not going to cut as accurately. Also, it's safer to always work with a sharp blade. When you've got a blunt blade like this, you end up sawing backwards and forwards. Your ruler can sort of slip, and you want to keep safe. So actually working with a sharp blade is much safer than working with a blunt one. When it comes to the rotary cutters themselves, there are lots of different brands of rotary cutters and lots of different types. There are a couple of different sizes. These are all 45mm. That's 45mm from one side of the blade to the other, and they will vary slightly in how you actually take them apart, but the majority of them are like this, where you have a screw on the back with a washer and you remove your blade. I do have a pack of replacement blades here. Now, the more blades you buy at one time, the cheaper they tend to be. I buy them in packs of 10, and you do actually save money by buying bigger packs, but obviously you need to keep them safe. So these have come in their own little caddy. The what I call it, the dead one from this, sometimes I save them when they get evenly blunt, so they basically wear down. I save them for another rotary cutter which I use for cutting paper, but this has got a nick out of it, so that's not very good for that either. So I need to replace this. Now you can put it in a sharps tin, or I have a spare one of these that has actually got what I call dead blades on it, and I've written dead blades in the back, so I will put all my old blades in there and they're going to be safe and secure. But let's take this apart. So what we've got here is you have your blade, which is currently covered. If I pull it back, you'll see this one has a cover that comes back. Some of them the blade will go forwards, some of them the cover will slide away, but we want to keep that blade engaged. And then this is the way that I always change my blades. I'm going to turn my rotary cutter upside down and I'm going to undo the screw. So let's just undo this screw. I'm going to put my finger on the front because it's quite tight. There we go. So, but you notice I'm keeping my finger away from those blade edges, because even though they are smooth against this, you could still scuff your fingers against it. But I'm just holding that so that I can unscrew that screw, and I'm just going to lay it face down. Then I take off the washer. Now I always put my washer down as it comes off of my piece so that I remember which way it needs to go back on. But I also want to clean this as I'm going along, and I've got here a wipe which is actually a screen wipe. So I'm just going to use that just to remove any dust. I use screen wipes, or I use a wipe that's designed for spectacles. I'm now going to lift that up. You see that comes off, and give it a bit of a shake, and the blade is down here. Now I'm going to give this, the blade has been detached, but you can see all this gunk that has built up. So I want to get rid of as much of that as I can. Keep that nice and clean. All right, and now I'm going to very carefully lift this up, and without touching the blades on the edge, lift that out of the way. So I'm keeping my fingers, because even though it's blunt, it is still razor sharp. I'm going to put that over there and then deal with that in a little while. Now clean my piece. All right, so we now have those bits. So I'm going to get my new blade, and a lot of the time you'll see they've got oil on them. That's fine, that's just to keep them lubricated. And very carefully, sometimes you can do it with a pin, just separate them. And I'm just grabbing a pin because I've got more than one here, they're all sticking together. So I've got a couple there together. Just going to keep my fingers away from that edge. There we go. And again, I'm touching the top and the bottom of the blade. I'm keeping my fingers away from that edge. And there's my blade. There we go. So I'm going to pop that onto the top. All right, wipe my fingers. And now this piece, I had it that way. That's going to go back on like that. And then again, keeping my finger away from the blade, I'm going to push that blade cover back in and put my finger back on that to hold everything together. You see, the blade is now fully covered. My fingers are nowhere near that blade. We put the washer back on. Now the washer needs to go back on correctly, and you'll see that it is actually shaped. So it's got two straight edges. I've also got, if I find them, my straight edges on here on that screw. So it fits in exactly the right place. That will not then sort of twizzle because it's in there correctly. Then I take my screw and I'm going to put that back on in the way that it came off. Now all of these bits have been cleaned. Tighten that up, make sure it's nice and tight, and turn it over, and then I can see that I'll be able to pull the blade back to expose it. And also what I do as well is, obviously when the cover is on, I'm going to give that a bit of a wiggle with my finger because that should not move. If I've put my washer on backwards, that will actually rattle or it'll move under my fingers, and there will be a gap between this safety cover and the blade itself. Whenever you've got your hands near this blade, I must reiterate, you have the safety cover on. I'm also just going to quickly give that a little bit of a clean in there as well. Get in there with my screen washer. Slide that down, keeping my fingers away from the blade. Treat this as you would a razor blade. You wouldn't run your finger along the edge of a razor blade. And there we go. Everything is nice and clean. I've got a brand new blade in there. My old blade is ready to be disposed in my little box like this. I have a spare one of these, as I said, where I put my old blades. I do keep them separate so that I don't mix them up, but that will now cut beautifully again. And when you've got a worn down blade, it's surprising, you don't notice that it's worn away until you replace it, and all of a sudden everything cuts so smoothly and with so little effort. So there we go. We have given one of our most commonly used quilting tools a little bit of a tidy up. We've given it a little bit of a neaten up. Everything is nice and clean and sharp, and we've got rid of any of the nicks that are going to get you soaring backwards and forwards, because that means that you are putting more pressure when you are cutting, which means that things can slide. It's also harder work on the elbows and the shoulders, so having a nice clean blade with no nicks out of it is an absolutely fabulous way to start your new project.